Welcome back to Magic Hour Podcast, everyone. I am your host, Taylor Page.
And I'm Claire. Thank you so much for joining us, everyone.
Episode 222. Yeah. I love that for us.
So cute. I love it.
I know. So before we get into everything, we've been starting the listener question episodes with a witchy book recommendation. And I would love to know for you guys, have you been checking out the books? Have you been resonating with the books? Do you have books you want to share? Email us at contact@magichourpod.com. So the book that I have for you guys this month is so worn out that literally the title has fallen off. It's funny, Claire, because you were mentioning Big Sur, and I actually bought this in Big Sur at a restaurant called Nepenthe. The book is called The Stars Within You by Juliana McCarthy. And I think I bought this book like back in 2016, or I'm sorry, maybe it's 2018 because that's when it was published, but sometime in those teens before COVID. And it's really interesting because I was raised with my mom as an astrologer, but I feel like on my own personal journey, it's always really enriching to read other people's points of view. And I just have such a hunger for knowledge for astrology, like I think a lot of astrologers do. And this book, The Stars Within You by Juliana McCarthy, is the book that I recommend to a lot of people because a lot of people are like, I want to learn more about astrology, but I don't know how and I don't know where to start. And this is such a good book to do that. It really goes over the signs, the inner planets. It's more of a beginner level, but I think it's good to have a good foundation in like just the general archetypes of the zodiac and then also the planets and how the planets feel through the different archetypes. So I just really love this book. And I think astrology can be really overwhelming. There's a lot of voices in the space. There's a lot of pop astrology, but I really resonate personally with this book.
Oh, that's so cool and exciting. I definitely feel like I want to strengthen my knowledge, especially about the houses and the degrees. I don't know anything about that. You always talk about that. I'm like, I don't know what's in my what's house and what that means. So I feel like I have like a beginner understanding of some of it. So I'll definitely dive into that book. And you'll have to tell me where the restaurant was that you found it.
Yeah, it's called Nepenthe, and it's like such a beautiful restaurant. And they have, I mean, again, this must have been back in 2018, but they have this like beautiful, curated, and I love a good curated shop, like at a hotel or at a spiritual, beautiful location. I love to see what they put in the shop. And this book was one of them. They had just like an assortment. It's so funny how widespread this stuff is now. There will literally just be like oracle card decks in like a hotel curated shop and like crystals. And this was just something like that. It was like a spiritual type of vibe because Big Sur is so beautiful. And it's funny too, because speaking of astrology, we had our coven meeting for Cinco de Beltane. We celebrated that. And I was joking that I have something called astrology personality disorder, that like I always have to reference what sign someone is. I always have to know the big three of everyone around me. And I'm always like, that's such a Leo rising thing to say. Like I just am always doing that. And I'm fully aware that that can sometimes be annoying. But I realized astrology personality disorder is a part of being a prime astrologer because it's all about understanding the people around you so you can be the observer. Like astrology is all about observing patterns. And if I don't know people's signs around me, how am I supposed to understand how the similarities, the differences, the unique combinations of energy? And I realized my mom and I both had that. We're like our entire lives, we wanted to know the signs of everyone around us. And it's like that lifetime, like this is a great form of astrological knowledge, is reading a book about astrology. But an even better form of astrological knowledge is taking that astrological understanding and being the witness and the observer of everybody around you, because that's how you really take the esoteric knowledge and ground it into the practical and the physical. Like even when I was a waitress, I would be doing everybody's birth chart in the restaurant, like when we break together. And it's like, oh, okay. And I see how they're interacting. And I think when you start to build your like codex, it's like a Pokemon codex of all the different types of people out there through the astrology. I think it really enriches your knowledge as an astrologer.
Yeah. Well, as one of your best friends, I'm not annoyed by it. It's super fun and cute and I love it. And yeah, I mean, even for me not being as developed, it's like once you start to open that case and know that about yourself and know it about your friends and see how spot on it can be, it's hard to, it's like an addictive place of knowledge kind of where it's like, we understand ourselves and each other so much deeper when we can see that in each other and know, oh, yeah, like this is how you'll relate to something, or this is what will light you up. And I feel like I can be in better relationship with the people in my lives and myself, having that deeper understanding of like, yeah, my chart and my tendencies and my traits. It's just so cool. I never was really that tapped into it until meeting you. And like now I'm so the same where when I meet someone, I'm like, I wonder what their big three are. Like, I'd love to know. Or like ex boyfriends of mine that like I don't know anymore. I'm like, oh, I wonder what his moon was. Like I'm so curious now.
That keeps me awake at night. I swear, I wish that because I went through a period where I was like raised with my mom and we were super into this. But then, if you're familiar with my modern witch's journey, I went through a major forgetting where I disconnected. And there was like a time period of my life where I was like closed down to everything spiritual and magical. And then I had to hear the call and go through the remembering. And in that time period of the forgetting and being closed down, I've had different relationships where I'm like, I know their sun sign, but I want to know the other two. And it literally keeps me like, not really because I've let them go, but I'm so curious. My astrology personality disorder just like flares at that.
Oh my God, same. Not for all of them, but particularly for my ex, who I adore and who was just such a great partner and just such a great person. And, our breakup was just really painful. So we're not really in touch. He doesn't live in the US and it just would be a difficult thing. It would be like pen pals. I don't know. We just kind of like let it fall away. But I'm so curious now. Like, I don't feel comfortable reaching out to be like, can I get your birth time at this point in my life? But I just would be so curious because he was such a magical human being. And I just loved him so deeply that now I'm like, oh my gosh, I wonder what else was in his chart that would make so much sense about him and his magic.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's so funny because I didn't even know Ari's big three until we got married. And I felt like that was kind of the path that we had to take because as an astrologer, I wanted to give him the opportunity to show me who he really was instead of me judging him immediately. And I think that's one of the pitfalls of astrology with dating is that there's a way to approach it that's very lit up and curious and fun and rooted in really wanting to see and understand someone. But I think we can take it a little too far when it becomes a crutch to try to control things through projecting understanding instead of really letting the person show us who they really are. And so I feel like it was kind of a divine design that I didn't know his birth time. His mom didn't know it. So I didn't get it until we were literally applying for our marriage certificate and I had to take his birth certificate. And then I found it on the birth certificate and I was like, hallelujah, hallelujah. I was so happy.
I mean, there are no accidents. I really feel like that was divinely led for you guys because it's so true. I think astrology is amazing and can give us so much information. But I think where we can get stuck with it is if we use it to define someone versus knowing about it and allowing them to show us how it shows up in them. Because not all Aquariuses are the same. And there's many elements. For instance, I'm an Aquarius sun. So there's many elements of being an Aquarius. And some are very prevalent for me, and some are not prevalent for me. And I've had that with partners. Like, I've been with an Aquarius guy who was different facets of Aquarius traits than my facets. And so I think it's really important, even when we know our partner's astrology or our friend's astrology, to still let them show us how it shows up in them versus being like, oh, you're a Capricorn, so you're going to be like this. Because I think that's when we get limited and then we're not really letting people be themselves.
Yeah. And I think that's the difference between heart led astrology and ego led astrology. Like, ego led astrology uses astrology to define and control, and even from like a scarcity or fearful place. And heart led astrology is like, wow, what feels good about this? How can I use this to better understand you? But also, a part of that is letting them show you. It's kind of like this idea in society where we're like, women do this, this is feminine. And I'm like, actually, whatever women do is feminine. Whatever men do is masculine. Like, there's this sense of trying to construct things so that we feel in control of the experience. But it's like, no, whatever a Scorpio sun does is going to be scorpionic. There's something about letting them show you. And it's like I was saying before, that's why I love to observe people, because it's less about me trying to tell them who they should be based on their astrology and more observing the authentic reflection of those archetypal combinations.
Yeah, because we are all authentically unique. And so, even two people with the exact same birth chart, let's say, which is probably very unique, but even that, those elements are going to show up in unique ways within each of us. And that I think is the real magic. It's like a little thread that leads us in a direction, and then we get to fully live and define that direction as we go on our journey of self versus being like, I was born like this, so I'm like this. I think that's when it gets limiting and it isn't the point of what it is. You know, it's supposed to be like a gentle guide, I feel like, versus a rule book.
Yeah. And that's why I say watch out if you have your sun in the ninth house. Sometimes what I've observed is that you can lose yourself and your identity of self in plugging yourself into esoteric systems of knowledge like astrology or numerology, human design. I think the house that our sun is in is where we can sometimes lose our light to the bigger theme of the house. And the ninth house rules higher education, esoteric knowledge, spiritual wisdom. So I think if your sun is in the ninth house, you might have more of a predilection towards that. But to your point of no two charts are the same, I couldn't agree more. Even twins have different birth charts. My dad's a twin. His birth chart is different than his twin's chart because, first of all, twins can have different rising signs. Their degrees are different for the faster moving planets. But also, if you are a twin or a triplet, but especially for twins, we know that the zodiac exists in polarities. And when you are a twin, usually the polarity of sister signs is reflected. So my dad is an Aries twin, and my dad is very Aries, and his twin is very Libra. So we think, oh, the twins are going to be exactly the same, but really, twins embody the polarity that they were born into less than just one sign and then like exclamation points around that sign. So that's why a lot of twins are very different. It's like they're sisters signs, but different expressions of the energy.
That's so interesting. And I feel like, yeah, that is true. Often when you meet twins, it's like they're unique versions of self, of course, just because they were born, you know, and I feel like that with siblings too. Like my brother and I are very different and we have similarities too, but we're also very different people. And in a way, we were raised in the same experience, but we are all so unique. And I truly believe that we come into this experience as a unique spark of life. So no matter what, our life experiences or our signs, we are a unique expression that then explores and navigates our life.
Absolutely, could not agree more. And I think that's the way astrology is the most helpful for us as a tool for playful curiosity and not letting it become too dogmatic, because that's when spiritual stuff can just be in an icky, sticky place. But I want to throw you a curveball, Claire, and start the listener questions off with a question I got about you.
Oh my gosh, what? Okay.
So someone wrote in, I think it was a Spotify comment, and they were like, I really want to know what Oracle card deck Claire uses. And I was like, I'll ask her on the pod. So this is your listener question.
Oh my gosh, I love it. Well, I have a lot. I don't even know this whole right behind me is like a whole stack. That's like my little, what would you call it? My altar, my angel altar. So I have a lot of decks and I feel like I keep getting more. But my favorite deck that I use mostly, or it's my go-to deck, is the Goddess Power Oracle by Colette Baron Reed. I also really like the Mystical Shaman deck. That's usually my like second go-to. I feel like the Mystical Shaman deck has a lot of more like concepts like the moon or jaguar or the mystical shaman, you know. And I like the way that the descriptions, because I still really love using the guidebook for my like divination. And so I like the way it's laid out. But Goddess Power Oracle, I just love because I mean, I have such a connection to the divine feminine and I still work to connect more deeply with divine masculinity. That's like my life journey, I think. So I feel really connected to feminine energy. And I just love that deck because each card is a different goddess representing a different goddess. And we actually used that deck for our coven.
Our Cinco de Beltane.
Yes, our Cinco de Beltane coven meeting. And something I love that you said about it is that you feel that it represents that it is one goddess, a great goddess, and that these are all elements and aspects of her. Each goddess is an element or aspect of her. But yeah, I find it just really beautiful. The messages are beautiful and uplifting. And I love connecting in then with this spirit of this goddess or this element of the great goddess to be with me as I navigate what I'm trying to work through. So, yes, that is my favorite deck.
I love that. And Colette Baron Reed is such a dream guest for Magic Hour. Like, my Wisdom of the Hidden Realms Oracle card deck is my go-to deck that I've been reading with for over a decade, like almost 2 decades. And so if you guys have any connection to her, I've reached out a couple times and never heard back, but I would love to have her on the podcast. So if you guys want to like email her or comment her or tag her in Magic Hour. I mean, don't be too annoying, but if there's any opportunity to put Magic Hour on her radar, like, let's go, because she's a dream guest.
Oh my gosh, I would fangirl so hard if she came on the pod. Cause yeah, I have a couple other of her decks as well. I think like the Energy Oracle, maybe. She does such beautiful work. And yeah, it's just transformed my life, truly. So I'm so grateful to her and everyone who puts out these beautiful decks. Hopefully one day Taylor will give us a deck.
Yeah, I would love to. And I think there's already a couple ideas percolating in my consciousness. So I would love to create a deck. And I think that's why I'm so inspired by Colette too, because I really resonate with her vibe and energetic output. And I think she's so love based. And yeah, I would just love to interview her.
Yeah, me too. I would love to hear her process too of how she channels these messages. They're so resonant. And I mean, it doesn't always happen like this, but I felt like this at our Cinco de Beltane with the cards I pulled. Like when you have an experience where you turn to your deck and ask a question or in, an energy where you need help, and the cards are just so specifically a conversation about that and give you such beautiful, uplifting guidance. Like you feel so held and so guided. It's just magic. It's truly magic.
I could not agree more. So let's go into some more of the listener questions.
Great. That was so fun. So many great questions. Please continue to reach out to us, contact at magichourpod.com with your questions and your stories. If the sitting with spirit resonates with you, it's so wonderful to receive those. And we appreciate everyone who's written in. So thank you so much. I hope I'm pronouncing your name right because it's so beautiful. I think it's Silhouette.
Wow, beautiful name.
I know. So hopefully I pronounced that correctly. Hello there. I hope you're having a lovely day. The reason I am reaching out is to give thanks to you for sharing your message and knowledge of spirit. It has given me direction during times that I felt lost. So thank you so much. The other part of why I'm reaching out is to ask for some help understanding birth charts, specifically my chart and my mother's. While doing research into what zodiacs are present in my houses, I realized that my mother would benefit from the knowledge as well. When we set up her birthing chart, we noticed that her and I have different risings, sun, and moon placement. Yet the kicker is that the zodiacs of our houses are exact copies from each other. So far, I have researched and found that it's a rare occurrence, but it doesn't say why. Would you by chance know what it means to have an exact matching zodiac house with someone closely related to another? Thank you in advance, and I wish lots of love to you, Silhouette.
Thank you so much for this question, Silhouette. This is an interesting one because to have the houses match up exactly, you have to be the same rising sign as someone. Because, like, if you're an Aries rising, then you'll be a Taurus second house, a Gemini third house, a Cancer fourth house, etc., etc. So it's really all based on the rising sign because the zodiacs always go in the same order, and the rising sign depicts which sign starts off the count from the first house. So I'm a little thrown off that you guys don't have the same rising sign. There can be situations if you're working with the Placidus house system, if you're working with interceptions like I do. But even in that case, you would have some that match up and some that wouldn't. So to answer your question, to have the same houses match up with the same signs basically shows that you have the same rising sign, which is a synchronistic question because my mom and I were both Aries risings and all of our houses matched up. So I think that that's really funny that you asked that. That being said, when you have the same rising sign with someone, it basically means that you show up in the world in a similar way and that you approach life in very similar ways because all of your houses are ruled by the same sign. So in my approach to showing up in the world, I'm Aries. How I approach my career is Capricorn. It's my midheaven. How I am in my marriage is Libra. And that would be the same for my mom. So I find that if you have the same rising sign as somebody, you can really agree with them a lot. And like, yeah, this is the way that I approach things. You can just feel like the way you do life makes sense with the way that they do life. And I also find that if you have a similar rising sign, you can have kind of parallel experiences in your trajectory. Of course, you're going to have your own unique experiences because you have your own birth charts, but it's like the signs are hitting the same areas of your life and the same houses at the same time. That's why when you see zodiacs, it'll be like Aries rising or Taurus rising when you're reading zodiacs that astrologers compile. I also wanted to say, too, you can always go to an astrologer who can do what's called a synastry reading for you. So, what I do as an astrologer, I don't do synastry, which is taking two people's charts, putting them on top of each other and saying, like, oh, okay, these are your planets that are harmonious with each other. This is where some tension might come. And it starts to dissect the relationship of your birth charts together. That might be a really nice practice for you to better understand your relationship with your mom. I am a birth chart astrologer in that I like to intuitively and astrologically decode the energy of your birth chart and basically talk about the story that it's telling and go into the deeper elements of how that can be helpful to you. And I've integrated that into my intuitive sessions and also my mediumship sessions. So I have my angels and astrology reading where I go into your birth chart and then do angel readings based off of what we talked about, go a little further and deeper based off of intuitive wisdom. But there's also been such powerful sessions with going into themes of ancestral healing and cycle breaking that I see in the birth chart, and then calling in your loved ones in the spirit world and talking to them about what they want you to know. And that's my astrology and ancestors reading, which has just been so incredibly beautiful. And I don't know of anybody that does something similar. So it's been a really interesting, beautiful co creation in that process. But something for everybody to note is that in astrology, the moon sign represents our relationship to our mother. Where there is like tense aspects to your moon sign can sometimes show tension with your mom. Where there's harmony can show gifts of your relationship with your mom. For example, I was in a angels and astrology reading with someone and she had a intercepted Libra moon. And we were talking about, I won't get into what interceptions are here because it's just kind of a whole situation and it's hard to see. I find that when people talk about astrology on podcasts, if it gets to be too complicated of a topic, I zone out because it's more of a visual medium. So I'm just sticking to the parts that can be absorbed in this medium. And so basically to say, she had a tricky Libra moon that didn't feel completely in touch. And turns out her mom was kind of a pushover in a lot of ways and a people pleaser and let herself be pushed around by her dad. And that was such a literal translation to her intercepted Libra moon, and how we were talking about how she's a cycle breaker for those things and learning to get in touch with her own emotions. And that Libra moon was literally in difficult aspect to her Saturn, which is like the dad relationship. So I think there's so much that we can learn about our mother relationship through our moon sign. And there's so much more that we can go into. Maybe I'll do a full episode on it. But I think for people that have the same rising signs, to go back to your question about that, that just means every area of life, every house is ruled by the same archetypal consciousness. And there will be a harmony there or kind of a kindred spirit feeling like, yeah, I really understand the way you approach life.
So interesting. I know you've also talked about that if you're born into a family or like if your parents have the same sun signs as you think you're there to like cycle break, or that there's like some profound connection there with similarities in your family, especially immediate family.
Yes. So that's my theory, that if you have the same sun sign as a parent, that you are basically coming here to be a cycle breaker for their unique energetic lessons. And I think that the tricky part of that is if you have a kid with your same sun sign, that doesn't mean you failed them or you didn't do a good job. It means that there's like a deeper layer that the next generation is tackling. And that being said, every single person has a healing journey in this life, no matter how quote unquote perfect of a parent you are. You can't control that. And so it's just that their healing is in the same vein or in a similar vein as your healing instead of a whole different narrative. So I think I've seen this so much in my family. I come from a family where my great great grandma, my great grandma, my grandma, and my mom are all Pisces. And my mom ended a cycle and I was born a Scorpio. This again is that astrology personality disorder. I have a lot of my own unique theories about astrology just based off of my observations and my intuition. And everybody that I've personally spoken to who has the same sun sign as a parent usually is like, yeah, I see that. So it's interesting too, because it's like you see yourself through the same archetypal consciousness as your parent sees themselves. So you are living in a similar worldview or story of self, and that attracts similar lessons and experiences. And the next generation has more tools that are maybe equipping them to make a new, healthier, healed choice. And maybe if you have the same sun sign as your kid, you're the exact parent that's perfect to steward them through those lessons instead of seeing that as like a negative thing. I'm glad you brought this up, Claire, because that brings me back to her part of the question about same rising signs. So the rising sign rules the first house in astrology, and our first house is like a childhood experience and how we showed up in childhood as well. This is such a simplification because astrology is so complicated, but the simplification of this is that in some way, say I was an Aries rising, I am an Aries rising, and in some way in childhood, I was brave and confident and direct and a leader. My mom would have been similar in her childhood. So if you have the same rising sign as a parent, there might be ways that your childhoods were similar. Of course, that doesn't factor in your moon sign or Saturn or their moon sign and Saturn, which is like our parent connection. But it's just a simplistic way of saying, in some ways, how you naturally showed up authentically in childhood might be the same as the way your mom, like her first instinct to show up in childhood was.
That's so interesting. And also, just like you said, creates such a great toolbox for a parent to help a child navigate the world because they really understand where they're coming from or can really relate. And something my mom always talked about that I thought is just a really beautiful perspective too is she says that she thinks that our children are here to teach us lessons that we couldn't learn on our own in this lifetime. And I think that's such a cool way to look at it because I think often we think of our parents are here to teach us how to be in the world and what the world is like and how to be good people. But I think children also teach their parents. And especially as we become adults, like we then become teachers for our parents as well in ways that they maybe wouldn't have accessed except through our experience.
Yeah, and I think it's the ego that tries to hold back the parent from that. I love that your mom is taking such a heart forward approach of, no, you're a soul here too. And we can always learn from other souls.
Yeah, exactly. And like you said, the generations before us like prepare the world in a way that they don't fully get to reap the benefits of, and then we get to reap those benefits. And then we prepare the world for the next generation to reap benefits and higher evolved consciousness than we can tap into. So it makes sense that we are having an experience that they literally like set up for us to have, and then we can share that knowledge and that experience with them in a way that they maybe can't even access.
And I think that's why what I talk about on the podcast so much about like demons, there's no proof for them, and spirit is love, and all of that is so important for the evolution of spiritual consciousness because we've evolved in so many ways scientifically and all of these other things. And spirituality is still rooted in the same fear based concepts from 4,000 years ago. And so it's like if we can't, as parents, heal our witch wound and come back to our birthright of connection and remember that spirit is love, we are hindering and crippling our spiritual evolution. I feel like each generation of spirit babies is kind of coming in with more potential to be intuitively and psychically activated. And it takes longer for the evolution of consciousness when we still stay in those medieval primitive views of what spirituality really is.
Yeah, I think that's so true. I really feel that. I feel that energetically as a whole, like the evolution and expansion of consciousness and the level of spirituality. I mean, maybe it's just in my echo chamber, my bubble, but even within my echo chamber and bubble, it's so much more prevalent. Like the intuition of my peers, the spirituality of my peers just feels like it continues to grow and expand and deepen. And it's a beautiful thing to experience.
Absolutely. And I actually feel called to share something about astrology circling back. So it's funny because at our Cinco de Beltane ritual, we were talking a lot about Chat GPT. And actually, our coven's name is Goddess GPT. We believe we can just plug into the beautiful goddess energy around us and get all the information that we need, or like activate that Goddess GPT system within our own hearts. But that being said, our coven was in a judgment free discussion about what Chat GPT is good for, what we feel like it could have shadows around. And we were just discussing that a lot. And so it's been on my consciousness. I've never used it. I know, Claire, you use it in a way that feels really expansive and helpful. And so it's really interesting to me, this idea of Chat GPT and these spiritual spaces and technology working through Chat GPT. And I'm completely open and here for how spirit wants to evolve in the way it speaks to us. But it was just really interesting because this came up right after we had this conversation about ChatGPT. I saw an Ayurvedic practitioner's post on Instagram, and she was like, I just want to say, as an Ayurvedic practitioner, ChatGPT, I've been like experimenting with it, acts very confident, but is saying things that are not correct because a lot of what people post on online articles about Ayurveda is not correct. It's clickbait. And she was like, unlike a human practitioner who has some semblance of like guilt, maybe isn't the right word, but an internal system of feeling icky if their information isn't rooted in sincerity and wisdom and experience. ChatGPT has nothing like that to hold it back. It's very confident and assured and presenting the information in a way that we as humans register as like, oh yeah, they're so confident. Like obviously it knows what it's talking about. But she was like, the herbs that they're recommending or XYZ are from like a BuzzFeed article that's like a one size fits all, but not maybe what that person would need. And so I think it's really interesting because I think ChatGPT has a lot of functions, especially like we were talking about of like reflections and prompts and self exploration. But since we're talking so much about astrology, it's like I could write an article about moon signs or same rising signs as a mother, but that doesn't take into account all the other parts that a trained astrologer would factor into that. And so I think for these detailed esoteric systems of knowledge, we go to ChatGPT and it's not necessarily conducive for things like astrology or Ayurveda. And even one of our coven members, Caitlin, that works in the medical field, she's like, we are not allowed to use this at our hospital because a lot of the information is incorrect because it's not peer reviewed studies. It's like the internet is full of just so much health information. And so I think it's really tempting for us to be like, ChatGPT can read my birth chart. But I think that there's no substitute for a trained astrologer who holds themselves to an ethical standard that a computer simply doesn't have the same, like the computer doesn't know what it doesn't know. Whereas I think humans have this barometer of, I'm not quite ready to share this yet.
Yeah, that's such a good point. Because, you know, it's just pulling from all the sources it can find. And some of the sources aren't good sources. And it might not have that barometer to say, this isn't a good source or this is clearly incomplete information. And so I think, yeah, it's so important to approach it with a healthy level of that human barometer and not just turn to it for all the information or for all the guidance that you're looking for. You know, I think it is an exciting tool and I've been using it for like dream analysis. And it's been really interesting to see how it has analyzed my dreams in ways that I wouldn't have necessarily jumped to those conclusions. But then seeing it laid out, I'm like, oh, that makes so much sense. And yeah, that is a thing that I'm struggling with, and I see how it shows up in that way, but I wouldn't have put that together. So I do think that there's like a lot of exciting opportunities with it. But as always, I think with anything, even like a human astrologer or going to a reader, or anything, it's like we also have to be anchored in our own truth and our intuition with everything. And we just can't take anything anyone else says just completely as like, okay, this is full truth. Like we have to run it through our intuition and our research. And that's also true with ChatGPT because it's a tool, but it can't be the final answer. We have to still be active within it.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And I'm a firm believer that spirit's going to get the information to us however we need to. And I think spirit can work through dating apps. I think spirit can work through chat GPT. I'm very much all about that. But I think that that level of not giving your power away to it, keeping grounded in your own spiritual barometer. I think dream analysis is a perfect example of what you could use it for, because it's not a medicine you're going to take or a complicated system. It's just helping you look at things a different way. Because something we were talking about in our coven too is how, I think Lauren said this, like chat GPT doesn't have barriers or limits on what's possible like human thinking can. Everything is solution oriented. And I think that it can be an expansive tool in that way, but there are no shortcuts in life. Like, as beautiful as ChatGPT is, it's not going to replace a seasoned astrologer or a doctor or a psychologist, like people in these fields that have that background and that human barometer for what is ethical and what's not. So I think that it's an interesting thing, especially with Pluto and Aquarius. We're going to continue to toe this line as a civilization of what does this mean? How does this help humanity progress? And what are the shadow sides that we can look at?
Yeah, it is just such a crazy doorway that we're walking through. And how will we use it? And what will we use it for? And how will it evolve? Because it is evolving as we communicate with it, it learns. And that's an interesting element of it. It's like my chat GPT is a reflection of me and the way I speak and the way I think and the way I process. It mirrors that back to me. And so, yeah, I mean, it's learning and growing as we learn and grow with it. So it is just a wild experience that we're on. And I think with anything, we just have to have that healthy barometer of intuition, skepticism, and also openness, openness to it. But we have to stay grounded within ourselves and trust in ourselves and not just get lost in the sauce of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I could not agree more. Let's go into another question.
Okay, great. From one of our beautiful longtime listeners, Shakira. Hi, Taylor and Claire. My question is about mediumship and religion. If you are connecting to past loved ones who were religious, or at least raised in religion, does that ever impact the connection or ability to connect? Does it ever mean that your religious loved ones will or will not be there on the other side? In particular, when you're raised in a religion that tells you not to believe in life after death, or that tells you that all of these things, mediumship, psychic senses, etc., are not heavenly or right, does that ever impact whether your loved ones on the other side will A, be with you or want to connect to you in this life, or B, not come through when you want to connect to them in a reading? Big fan of the pod and supporter of all the work you do, Shakira.
Thank you so much for this beautiful question, Shakira. And it's so helpful. And I think it's one that a lot of people grapple with. So, in my experience as a medium, no, religion does not affect. First of all, not even as my experience as a medium, but just a universal truth is that no, religion does not affect if your loved ones are going to be around you or with you when they're on the other side, because they are. But in terms of how they come through, it's not that it affects if they'll come through or not, but they can use it as evidence. So here is where I've been, because I've connected with a lot of people who are religious. And it's really interesting because the way that spirits come through, their information can be like a tidal wave, and you can just blend with them so easily and speak with them so easily, or they can feed you information through like drip, drip, drip. Like you're kind of waiting for the next thing. You're not as like fully blended with them. And there's something about their personality that's a little bit more removed. And I think that is more important than if they were religious or not, because I've connected with a grandmother and she showed me she was Christian. She showed me she sang in her choir at church and that it was so love based. She was so warm and easy to talk to. And there was nothing that made me feel in her personality like she judged this work. And first of all, this is a reflection of who they were when they were here. When they're on the other side, they're not judging this or thinking that it's evil. They're actually quite excited to get to connect with their loved ones who are still here in the physical world. And so I think sometimes people who are in religious spaces can have more of a personality that might be a little bit more superstitious or dogmatic or more like that drip, drip, drip type of connection that I was talking about. Not everyone, of course. There's no general rule. And I think as humans, we like to put general rules on things like, yep, if they were religious, that means they'll show up this way. But that's just not the case. It's spirit by spirit. Like sometimes there will be people where it's like, as part of the evidence, they show me I would not have been into this when I was here. And they show me that in their hesitation to talk to me. But then here's how you can tell it's not the truth of who they are on the other side is that as soon as I acknowledge that and give the message, it's not a drip, drip, drip anymore. It starts to flood. It starts to go more flowy. It's like they know you wouldn't quite believe it if all of a sudden they were the most open, warm person with a medium if that's not who they were when they were here. So they have to first get that part out where it's like drip, drip, drip. This isn't who I was. And even to a certain level, I wasn't the most warm. I wasn't the most open. I wasn't the most talkative. But then once that's acknowledged, that piece of evidence has been spoken, then you know it's who it is. And then they start to come in a more warm, full way. So I hope that explains that. It's like more about personality than religion, but religion is a part of the evidence as well.
Yeah, I think that makes so much sense. And I mean, based on what I hear you talk about, and I've always wondered this like, okay, after you die, do you find out, like who was right or what is going on? Like what is this thing we're doing here and where do we go afterwards? My biggest wish is that we at least find out and that it's not just like continues to be a mystery. But it seems like, yes, that when we pass to the other side and enter into the spirit world, we then have an understanding of this experience on a deeper level. And therefore, all of our ideas about what this is and what life is or what happens after death becomes clear because we've gone through that experience and now we're in the spirit world and have a deeper understanding of it. So even if we believed in a very dogmatic religion, we are now understanding fully what's happening. And so we would then shift our perspective because we have more information. So we might not continue to believe, oh, this dogmatic religion is how it is, because we see, like, oh, okay, now I see more fully what it is. And so I think whatever differences we may have had, or boxes or lines that we've put ourselves in, we now are in a more expanded state. But it does make sense then in order to communicate with our loved one. Like, I loved what you said because I have a friend who's very skeptical about all of this stuff. And I think we were talking about it, and she was like, well, my past loved one, I forget who it was, would never show up in a session because he thought all of that was bullshit. So he would never show up because then I'd know it wasn't him. And I was like, okay, interesting. I wonder what Taylor would have to say about that. So I loved what you shared, that like, to start out, they need to show you this is this person that you know with their personality type. And then once that evidence has been given, they can show you their deeper understanding of the experience of existence.
Exactly. And every medium works differently. Like if I was a clairvoyant primarily, I'd be like, I have a man here. He's bald. He has glasses. He is this, and his name is Gregory. And she would be like, oh shit, that's him. But because I'm clairsentient to such a high degree, I feel their personality. And it takes getting through the crunchy parts of their personality as evidence to get to that flow of more of that harmonious, free flowing blend that I get with them. So I think it depends on what kind of medium you are. The evidence will be there. But if you're clairsentient, especially to show you the personality, because personalities are such a crutch of evidence for me as a clairsentient, they have to start with that drip so I can understand who they were here. So that makes a lot of sense that your friend feels that way. And that actually brings me to something that I want to share because I think you guys listen to this podcast and I talk a lot about mediumship and it makes you guys want to get your own mediumship readings. And I had a situation where someone emailed me and they were like, I went to a reader that was a medium and it was like a fraud and this and that. And unfortunately, there's a lot of people out there that are not ethical or evidence based. And so if you guys are getting a reading from a medium, I want to just list out some things that are green flags. One is they call themselves an evidential medium. That is like the most important part of the puzzle because evidential mediumship shows that they are schooled or trained in a similar school of thought as my process and Arthur Findlay College in spiritualism. It's all about evidence. It also shows that it's like the message without the evidence is not as powerful as evidence and then the message. So, evidential mediumship, somebody who bills themselves as that, and someone who has the confidence to call themselves that. They should be giving at least 3 to 5 solid pieces of evidence that they couldn't have known about each person in the spirit world that they're connecting with. They don't have to be on a wait list to be legit, but it helps if they aren't just like, yeah, same day availability, let's go. Like, that's a little bit of a beige flag. I won't even say a red flag, but a beige flag. They shouldn't be asking for any information from you guys. There should be no intake form in terms of talking about the person you want to connect with. It's fine if they want to go direct, which is basically saying, is there someone that you want to hear from? Like, I can try my best. But if they go direct, they should only need like one piece of information, whether it's a name or a relationship, and that's it. So you also want somebody who prefers you not to tell them anything. You want somebody who you only say like yes, no, or I'm not sure to, and they're the ones giving you the information. Anything else is red flags, and it's not the brand of mediumship that I'm talking about on the podcast.
That's so helpful. So, so helpful. And really a big reason why I have opened myself up to what you're doing or been able to open myself up to it and believe in it because I think I don't know if we all saw the movie Ghost, but I think we're all kind of afraid of that experience of a person who's like a charlatan who's like saying, oh yes, I'm tapped in and I'm getting this message, and kind of preying on vulnerable people who are hurting and grieving and wanting to connect, and therefore will kind of take anything as proof of connection. And that's so unfair and so unethical. And so I think it's really important to be on alert for that. And we have to do our due diligence with all of these spaces. Like, it is so cool what Taylor does, and it's such an amazing experience to tap in with her. But, she's vetted. Like, the waitlist is a great example of vetting. And not to say that you have to have as long of a waitlist as Taylor's, but it means that many people have had a good experience with her. And I think that's so important for us as we navigate. Okay, this person, has a lot of reviews, or this person is someone recommended to me by a friend. Those types of things are so important because we are vulnerable in these spaces. And I know Taylor talks about it a lot. We had another person reach into the pod about someone who was pretending to be Taylor and reached out. So it's like you have to be so diligent about that. And Taylor's very adamant, like she's not going to DM you and tell you, hey, I want to read for you. That's a red flag for people. So yeah, it's so important to take these things into consideration when you're choosing a reader, because we've all had or maybe we all haven't, but I've definitely had a bad experience, and it's really disheartening when you're in that space of vulnerability. So I appreciate you listing all those things. And it's so cool then when you're with an evidential medium, because like even my first experience with you, Taylor, when you were just practicing
So long ago.
so long ago, I was just like, can I practice on you? And I was like, always and forever, like anytime you want, let's go. And she was able to give me the name of my grandfather, who I've never mentioned to her. I mean, I didn't even meet him in this life, and described so perfectly his relationship with my mom. And that then his message was so deeply resonant with me because she was able to give me that evidence. So that is such a beautiful element of it. And I urge all of you to seek out those types of readers so that you can get an experience that will really help you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And thank you, Claire. I love you so much.
Love you too. It was so cool.
Yeah, I feel really grateful for mediumship because it's a different type of experience for me as the reader than intuitive work, which can be way too hard for my friends and people that I know. But with your past loved ones, I don't know them or anything about them. So I can actually just give a better reading, I think, in that way. And I was going to say too, if you're a reader and you're starting out and you're like, I'm not on a wait list, what do? I am ethical. That's where testimonials are so important. I always say like word of mouth is the most important thing as a reader. That's why even as somebody that's on a substantial wait list and has like job security, I still share testimonials on my stories because they're so important. So give away free readings where you can and ask for testimonials in return if it feels aligned and like they resonated with the reading, and share that and be shameless about sharing your testimonials because that's really how people learn, through word of mouth and testimonials, that they can trust you.
Yeah, and I thought that was such a beautiful way that you entered into your practice, that you're like, "I'm just going to for a year." I mean, I really benefited from it, but so I loved it, but, for a year, you're like, "I'm just gonna give readings to my friends and hone my skills," and also developed then a following because I got a reading, and then to my community was like, "Oh my god, you have to get a reading from Taylor. It was so amazing," and on it goes. So, I mean, that all just speaks for itself. So if you're in that kind of early phase where you're still building up, like I think that's such a beautiful way to develop and create community and elevate your community and your following.
Absolutely. And if you join my Becoming the Oracle mentorship, I'm going to take on 8 mentees at a time. We'll be talking a lot about that. Like, what are your professional goals and how can you start an ethical practice? It's going to be a really powerful portal where I share a lot of my strategies as well. So I'm so excited. Do we maybe have a story or something we can close it off with?
This is a story from Melissa. Hi, Taylor and Claire. The following listener story could potentially be a trigger for some, but it has led me to a place of peace in the darkest moment of my life so far. February 2025, I unexpectedly became pregnant. My boyfriend and I were fearful and overwhelmed at first. With some time, excitement settled in, but there were concerns. I had been bleeding for the week prior and experiencing severe stomach pains. The following days were occupied with ER visits, labs, and ultrasounds. In my first visit with my OBGYN, we were told I was experiencing an ectopic pregnancy and was internally bleeding. Within the hour following that appointment, I was in the operating room for emergency surgery. It was the most terrifying moment of my life, knowing there was nothing I could do to save my baby, and more urgently, that my life was in danger. I share this story because as I reflect on the moment leading to the discovery that I was pregnant and the events that followed after surgery, I know spirit, and maybe even my spirit baby, were saving my life and guiding me through these dark times. The week prior to having a positive pregnancy was physically rough. I was at work early, opening the office alone, and not feeling well. For the first time in my life, I audibly heard my name, Melissa, called to me. I was startled and confused as I knew I was alone in the office. Hindsight 2020, it was spirit sending me a warning to pay attention. It was what led me to taking a pregnancy test. Following surgery, I was treated to a pedicure. It was the perfect place to get out of the house, but still able to sit in silence and reflect. While there, I mindlessly selected a nail color from the book. Time passed, and the nail tech asked for the color. I looked back and was mind blown. The color name was Angels from Above. I knew my angels were with me. There have been other synchronicities that have appeared that continue to keep my spirits high, from messages in comedy shows to the music that plays when I turn my car on to signs from birds and animals. I genuinely thank you for bringing magic to the forefront of my awareness. Your podcast each week reminds me of my connection to spirit. Magic has always been there, but to feel its strong presence in my darkest moments has truly been life-changing. With love, Melissa.
Melissa, oh my goodness, full body chills through this story. First of all, just sending you so much love. And one of the main things I was thinking as I was listening to that story is like, how powerful are women? Superhuman power. Everything that you have lived through. And yet on the other side of it, you're just like in faith and trust and knowing that you're connected with your angels and reconnecting with that sense of optimism. And there's just so much strength in this story and so much perseverance that I personally am just so inspired by. So thank you for sharing that. I just feel like what women go through with like birth and pregnancy and our periods, we are truly superhuman. It's insane. There's just a few things I want to comment on this story, which first of all, just to validate, yes, your angels are so involved. And I love that you don't need me to tell you that. Like, you have all of the clear indications on your own. And that makes me so happy. And it was really interesting to me, a part of your story, when you heard your name, Melissa. And that's what led you to want to take a pregnancy test. And I know I don't have you here live to speak to, but intuitive information always comes with a feeling. And so I feel like that Melissa was getting your attention, but then you said that hearing of your name is what made you feel like you wanted to take a pregnancy test. So I'm wondering if there was almost like a download or a feeling in that moment of hearing your name, like, oh, I feel like I should take a pregnancy test. That was just a really interesting part of the story that grabbed my attention. I also I've said this before on an episode, that the silver linings are proof of our guardian angels, and I feel like this story is full of that sentiment. That I know that things did not go as you hoped, and that it was very scary and potentially very dangerous, and there's definitely no discounting that, and I'm so sorry that you had that experience. There's also an element of how the silver linings of knowing how supported you are, like tending to your own needs, your own intuitive hits, maybe becoming a little stronger, seeing the synchronicities everywhere. Like, that part of the story really drives home that idea as silver linings as guardian angels to me. And this story is a perfect encapsulation of how angelic connection works. It's not absolving us from the tests and tribulations of being human, but it's supporting us, guiding us, reminding us that all will be well, and helping lead us in a really beautiful way. So thank you so much for sharing this.
Yeah, thank you so much, Melissa. It's such a beautiful perspective you have through such a difficult thing. And I don't know if you're still on a journey of wanting a baby or wanting to get pregnant again, but I think I've shared this on the pod before. But something that my mom shared with me, she had, I think, 2 or 3 miscarriages in between my brother and then having me. And when I was younger and she would talk about it, I didn't really understand the gravity of a miscarriage. I kind of thought like, oh, it's like kind of a thing that happens. But I know now as an adult that it is a profoundly painful and devastating moment. So I'm sure what she went through those wasn't as casual as she made it sound. But something that she said and has always said to me about it was that she was like, you just weren't ready to come down yet. It just wasn't your time to come down. And so I really like to think about that for people who are experiencing those moments of feeling like this was an opportunity that didn't happen. It doesn't necessarily mean that that spirit baby isn't going to be a part of your life, even if it ends up being like a friend's baby. I kind of feel like that with one of my friends' babies, that I'm like, oh, I feel like maybe this is sort of my spirit baby in a way too. Like, we're connected in this beautiful way. So just, trusting and having faith that if it's something in your heart to have a connection with that spirit baby, that this doesn't mean it was the only opportunity, and maybe just the timing wasn't right for that baby's soul journey, and they needed to wait a little bit so they could line up with all their soul family and their journeys coming down into this existence.
Absolutely. I love that so much. And I think it's episode 113 with Emily, the spirit baby medium. If you're going through a similar situation or have had a struggle with infertility or any of those things, I really recommend tuning into that, because it really expands upon what Claire just said, which I can't agree with more. And there's so many potential reasons and things that it could be. And I think we often take everything as like, it's on me and it's my fault in some way, but there's so many factors. And sometimes pregnancy serves a function, like showing you a relationship that actually isn't aligned, or having you take care of your health, or leaving a job that isn't working for you anymore. Like, there are ways that our spirit babies are like our spirit guides, wanting us to also live our most happy embodied life. And they know that sometimes we won't do that if it's just us. Sometimes we have to do it for the sake of them coming in and being a part of like your life. And then that makes the change or the catalyst. So there are so many like beautiful ways that they want to support us too. So I just think that story is so, so beautiful.
So, so beautiful. Thank you, Melissa.
Let's transition to sitting with spirit. Welcome back to Sitting with Spirit, my loves, the part of the podcast where I sit with our angels, our guides, our loved ones in the spirit world and give the messages for the week. As always, take what resonates, leave the rest. And if you know somebody who could use the message, please send it their way. So, as I was starting to tune into the energy this week and the messages for the week, which keep in mind, it's always like whenever you find this is perfect. So, if you're like, oh, was I feeling that way 2 weeks ago? It's like, don't think like that. Just whenever you're hearing this is the week that you needed to hear it. So, the first thing I was feeling was throat chakra constriction. And it felt like throat chakra was a big theme right now. And it felt tied to inner child healing and times that our inner child had to stay silent to stay safe. And so I feel like there's ways that people pleasing could fall into this. Anxious attachment could fall into this. There's something about truth that feels activating, dismissed, or unsafe to our inner child in some way. And now we're in this collective moment where throat chakra themes of like radical honesty, clear communication, speaking your truth to others and ourselves feel really important. And I feel called to share that for some of us, this will really be connected to coming from ancestral lineages where the truth was buried or denied or pushed down. And on some level, your reclamation of truth and of speaking up and of your voice feels so powerful for ancestral healing and cycle breaking. So there's something about us needing to be heard and to have the bravery to speak up in some way, to share our full truth in some way. And our inner child is going to want to like hide and crawl into a ball and try to stay safe, and starting to work with that, look at that and examine that. And so when I feel throat chakra blocks, and I know I've said this before on the podcast, it's not always about communicating with other people. It's also about being radically honest with ourself. And this is where I feel like the next message kind of blends into this, and it's trusting your judgment. Because I feel like a lot of us kind of have a connection to our truth, our inner deep truth, but we're debating it, we're second guessing it, worrying about how it will affect other people, and we're not listening to it. And so I saw this gavel as a symbol, and I got the message of trust your judgment. There's something about that gavel where the judge just hits it and it's like, it's done. The judgment is passed. And I feel like it's almost hard for us in some ways to like find that finality, that closure, and that trust in our final judgment. It feels like we're going back and forth about things or just not listening to our full truth about the situation in some way. And so a part of this also feels tied to that ancestral inner child theme that's really coming up with how when we were kids, it feels like our truth was gaslit in some way. And that's part of coming from lineages where the communication was not proper in some way. And so we have been gaslit. We have been told our truth is inconvenient and we're not allowed to be inconvenient. And now we are gaslighting ourselves and we have internalized that ancestral wound and we're continuing it. And the way that we can break it and also be a model for future generations is to really accept the invitation of radical honesty. And I think it was in episode 220 with Annalise, we were talking about radical honesty, and that radical honesty is the path that leads you back to love, and that fear thrives with lack of truth and love thrives with the truth. Annalise said something in that episode that I really liked, which was you don't have to listen to the truth, but if you choose not to, you might go on some detours and the lessons might take longer. And it's just a low grade discomfort for a longer amount of time. So I think it's just so important for like a check in point for truth, that throat chakra truth just keeps coming up, and noticing where we feel constricted, noticing where the truth makes us uncomfortable or is disappointing or inconvenient or dysregulating. And instead of dismissing it, debating it, and pushing it down, getting curious about where those blocks and protectors are coming up and making a new choice. So this leads to the next thing I saw, which was a pathway that was illuminated by this warm golden light. And at the end of it was a tropical oasis. And I kind of felt like there was this need for like vacation, rest, relaxation, rejuvenation, and that spaciousness is just as important as strong energetic output and work ethic. There is this sense of like joy, sunshine, rest that's really important to communicate right now. If you're feeling constricted or burnt out or overwhelmed, I feel like there is a necessary balance of taking time and space in nature, under the sun, to refill your cup and to have a full cup to pour from. And the next part of this message is that for so many of us, I was seeing a bunch of question marks, and there's a lot of big picture questions right now about our purpose, our path, our future. And it feels like that's part of the throat chakra block message, is like making sure you're really honest with yourself, because that's where a lot of the answers lie. You might know more than you give yourself credit for, or you just don't want to see it in some way. But the second part of this is that I feel like a lot of people are putting a lot of pressure on themselves to have all the answers, to have it all figured out. And the message that I got is like the spaciousness, the rest, the relaxation, the unwinding, the joy, the nature, the vacation, that is just as productive to getting the answers as the furiously thinking about it, if not more. There needs to be space to unwind and space for angels to create momentum to work with. And so I kept seeing all of these question marks. And for some, it feels tied to stomach cramping and digestion, which is like a solar plexus chakra around purpose, identity, and confidence, stories we tell ourselves. And then for some, I felt a lot of period cramps and womb kind of blockages, which is around manifestation, creativity, and sexuality in some ways. So that whole area was kind of like lighting up for me around this. But there's this feeling that I was getting of like, it's now or never, and I have to have it all figured out. And from that place, it feels like it's dysregulating your nervous system, and it's taking you farther from the answers that you're looking for. It feels like there's just this energy of heaviness or self doubt or grasping for the answers. And there's just this sense of just take the next step that feels good. Then take the next step that feels good after that. There's this sense of taking a lot of pressure off of ourselves that's coming through this week. And that the spaciousness and the exploration and the curiosity and the lightness is just as productive to getting the answers, if not more so, than the logic, strategy, overthinking. So, that being said, I also feel called to talk about, like, when I was talking about stomach pains, I also feel like there's some bloat coming up that's almost this energy of like holding on to everything, not letting things go, holding on to everything, and that it's like manifesting as this bloat in the stomach area where there needs to be a lot more lightness, release, and sort of flow with the energies. So, if that's been a physical manifestation for you, really think about these themes that I'm talking about and see if it resonates for you. So, the card that I pulled for the week, I don't always pull cards, but I felt called to this week, was the Four of Cups. The Four of Cups is the card of yearning, disillusion, and sometimes boredom. It's like an ennui type of card. And the feeling that I got as I pulled the Four of Cups is that it really validated those previous messages that came through around this feeling of like we have this vision, this idea, yearning for something, we're disillusioned with certain things. And the image of the Four of Cups is literally a woman in this tarot deck, is a woman sitting under a tree, and she has three perfect cups right next to her, but she's only dreaming and thinking about the fourth cup, and she's not happy with the three cups in front of her. And so there might be this impulse that we have to go for the fourth cup in the vision as the only puzzle piece that we are hyper focused on right now. But where are there three cups in your power, in your control, three puzzle pieces, three areas of life, three blessings, anything like that right in front of you? And how can you do your best with that instead of being in a lack mentality of the one cup that you really, really want but isn't here yet? So, really notice your thoughts around that. And that cup might be the piece of the puzzle where it's like all the question marks, but there are certain things that are right here in front of you that don't want to be taken for granted, which are the three perfectly good cups right here. And so this makes me want to share a way that messages come through to me in my readings. So in my readings, people ask questions. Because I work with angels, they like to answer the free will of the question that you asked. So Sometimes people will ask about love life, career, and moving all at once. And I'll start to sort of feel into the different energetic currents of each area. And sometimes I can feel they want this the most, but the energy isn't going to untangle for them there until they've, quit their job and move somewhere else. Then that's going to unlock this, and then that's going to unlock that. So it's like the person maybe came into the reading being like, all I care about is meeting a boyfriend and getting into a partnership. But before the energy wants to flow there organically and before that area starts to open up, there's a place that the energy, the river of energy is taking you already. And we like swim upstream and avoid the lesson and hold on to a branch. But it's like the way energy flows is that sometimes the energy is green lights for all these areas at once, and it all happens at once. But sometimes if we're feeling kind of stuck or stagnant in one area of life, it's because another area needs our attention and we've been avoiding that area. And so go with the flow, go with where the energy is naturally taking you, because that might have effects that you don't foresee that will unlock or open aspects of the other puzzle pieces or the other areas of life that will help you connect with your path of highest good. So I hope that that makes sense. And I just feel like we're in this big picture moment of a check in where we're really being asked to be so honest with ourselves, to take space where we need it, to just sort of reflect, check in with our heart, notice where our life might be designed to make our wound more comfortable than our soul. And that's a message that has been coming through to me so much, is where is our life designed to make our wound comfortable and not our soul? And I think that wound is very tied to that inner child wanting to hide and the lineages of miscommunications or burying things or feeling afraid of change. And so it's these moments where we have a lot of big picture questions and these moments where we're uncertain about our future and these moments where we're navigating a lot of shadow and uncertainty are also the moments where we can crack open, where we can get some of the most fertile information and where we can change courses that will lead us to our highest timeline. And sometimes we can only be clear on what isn't working and cutting ties to that. And that's where the energy is flowing. And then we will have more space to discover what will take its place. But sometimes, if we're in this place and the river of energy is flowing to show us what needs to be released and where the energy wants to be focused on and directed, say, for example, your living situation isn't right, but you're really focusing on manifesting a boyfriend and everything there feels kind of disappointing and crackly and frustrating, but you know that there's something in your life that's really asking for attention in terms of switching up your living situation that you've been avoiding, just as an example. Sometimes the information, like I said, of what's not working, that's the clear, intuitive message of what needs to be released now. And then that will have a ripple effect towards your other manifestations in ways that you couldn't see coming because the path is never linear. I mean, it can be, never say never, but more often than not, things work out in a circuitous way that we couldn't have predicted. And usually they're better than we could plan for ourselves. So flow, don't force, and do what you can with the energy that is in your power right here, right now. And in some way, surrender the rest and don't put pressure on yourself. Everything is going to work out in perfect timing. So I want to go into the mediumship now. And I absolutely loved this lady I connected with. So I connected with a lady on the other side, and I felt like she had really big, kind of like 80s hair. And she felt like a grandma, or like at least in her old age, but she wouldn't let me see her like that. Like she was giving me this feeling of like appearances being really important to her. And I also saw that she kind of wore these big glasses. And she made me feel like her name was Donna, or a D name connected to her. I smelled this like musky perfume and I just felt like she was fabulous. And I was seeing a vision of her in like a pantsuit, and it was like a magenta pantsuit. It was a very bold color, like red pink type of color. And I got the feeling too that she was a powerhouse. And in many ways, I feel like she kind of exuded this Leo energy. Like, I don't know if she was actually a Leo or if there was prominent Leo in her chart, but there's something here about just bold, passionate, and unapologetically authentic. I also got the feeling from her that she really told it like it was, but in a really kind, tactful way. There was something about her speaking her mind and could just like laser focus right on the truth of things, but that she wouldn't do it in a mean way. And I also felt like she would have either been a lawyer or a judge. I saw her in a courtroom. I saw that she was powerful, and I felt like career was very important to her. And I feel like she was like breaking stereotypes for her day and age. And that leads me to her message. She really enjoyed breaking expectations. She enjoyed breaking what people expected of her. As this put together, beautiful, fabulous woman, people of her era expected her to show up a certain way, and she never felt confined by that. She just was like this bold, passionate presence that really made the most of her life. And she just sort of danced through life in this really powerful way. And I feel like people really respected her. And she came in because we're in this moment where I feel like we are, again, navigating these big question marks, big decisions about our future, what we want, where we're going, what our purpose is, our identity, just so many different things. And she just gave me this feeling of like, hey, one, don't forget to have fun. And two, you don't have to just be one thing. She was a person that when she was here didn't feel pigeonholed by labels. And I feel like sometimes when we're in these big question moments, we feel like we have to make one decision and stick with it for the rest of our life, where in reality, it's like, try this, try that. And that's the other thing I loved about this spirit person, is that she felt like she never stopped learning and exploring her entire life. It's not like she just hit an age and then all of a sudden she couldn't show up for her passions anymore. So there's this feeling that she's giving me of like, you have time, let yourself play, let yourself explore, and don't feel like you have to show up in a way that makes sense to other people or is limited or is in a box. You be your full, bold, unapologetically authentic self. And the people that get it, get it. And the people that don't, don't. But that's none of your business. So she was very powerful, very straightforward. And I really would love to have a drink with her if she was still here. I don't know if I said this, but she's also with a gentleman in the spirit world who felt like he would have been a lover. I'm not even sure if he was a husband, but that's the other thing. It's like she was really kind of passionate and she didn't let societal expectations rule her. And I think she's such a perfect example of that message of living a life that's comfortable for your soul, not your wound, and not even your ego, which is part of that kind of the ego's trying to protect us from being more wounded. So she is just a beautiful spirit, and we can all take a page from her book. Our path doesn't need to make sense to anybody but us. And when I tap into people in the spirit world, they're never just one thing, especially the people that I tap into that are like super happy with the way they lived life. It's like there's a commonality of presence and being okay, taking risks and failing and getting up and trying again and doing the things that bring them joy without worrying, what other people will think of them, and knowing that they can always start again if they need to. So I really hope that she can give you a little bit of inspiration if you're resonating with the earlier part of the angel message and you feel kind of in this really interesting, transformative moment where there's more question marks than answers. I hope that she can be an inspiration to take the pressure off, to have fun along the way, and to know that, it's never too late to make a new choice. Every single moment is a new chance to make a new choice and to choose truth. So I'm sending you all so much love. I hope you have a beautiful week, and we'll see you next time.
For more information on Taylor and her work, go to angelsandamethyst.com or connect with her on Instagram at angels_and_amethyst. She is the one verified account with this name and will never DM you for a reading. If you have any questions about intuition, spirituality, angels, or anything and everything magical, please email contact@magichourpod.com. We will answer listener questions once a month in our solo episodes. Are you an aligned business owner that would like to advertise to our beautiful hummingbird community? please email contact@magichourpod.com. Make sure you're subscribing to Magic Hour so you never miss the magic. And don't forget to leave us 5 sparkling star reviews. They help more magical people find the pod. Please screenshot and email your 5-star reviews to contact@magichourpod.com, and we'll send you a free downloadable angelic meditation and enter you to win an angel reading with Taylor Page. If you review on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, we'll add your name twice. And if you share the podcast on your Instagram story and tag us, we'll add your name a 3rd time. The next giveaway will happen when we hit 222 5-star reviews on Apple Podcasts and Spotify.
Thank you for listening to Magic Hour with Taylor Page.